It's the cross-border booze brawl, and it sounds like it's far from last call. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
The answers you need
from the people in the know.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
In a political week dominated by questions about Canada's trade negotiations with the United States, the Prime Minister is sounding irritated by all the questions about trade irritants. Taking questions during an event in his Ottawa riding, Mark Carney was asked how the decision by many provincial premiers to pull American liquor from the shelves of government-owned liquor stores could impact the chances of a deal with the United States. The Prime Minister responded with some of his most forceful remarks yet on the outstanding issues between the two countries.
And what if this alcohol thing becomes more than an irritant? Look,
you know what's an irritant? Yeah. 50% tariff on steel, 50% tariff on aluminum, 25% tariff on automobiles, all the tariffs on forest products. Those are more than irritants. Those are violations of our trade deal. Okay?
Since the start of the trade war with the United States, several provincial governments have banned the sale of American-made alcoholic beverages, including Ontario, Quebec, BC, Manitoba, Nova Scotia, PEI, and Newfoundland and Labrador. The U.S. Trade Representative is Jameson Greer. He testified at a congressional hearing in Washington this week. He was asked about the ban on U.S. liquor sales. Greer said the Trump administration is at the end of its rope on this issue.
Well, it's at the provincial level, right? So we hear from the federal government of Canada, well, it's the provinces, and then we do have two provinces who don't have this. That being said, I think we're kind of at the end of our rope in just asking for them to do this. Think about it this way. There are two countries that have retaliated economically against the United States in the past year, the People's Republic of China and Canada. So that's kind of the company that they're running in. So my sense is there may have to be an enforcement action to deal with this issue on wine and spirits in Canada.
Prime Minister Carney did say these are decisions made by premiers, but he said it's a popular decision, and he added it's kind of a side issue.
Yeah, surprise, surprise. The Premier of Ontario is influential with the LCBO. Okay. But he's the client. He's also the duly elected Premier of Ontario. He's got a majority. And he's taking a view which, by most indications is supported by the vast majority of the population. What we want to do is make progress as the whole. These issues such as decisions on which alcohol to put on the shelves, we can make progress very quickly on that. With progress with in other areas. And I will just underscore, we understand that and this is the point I've been making since day one, is that this long period of integration, deeper integration between Canada and the United States is over, that nostalgia isn't a strategy, that hope isn't a strategy. We're not going to go back to exactly the way things were.
But are any premiers rethinking their stance on the U.S. liquor ban? Well, not the Ontario premier. Doug Ford was speaking on CBS News.
Well, as soon as President Trump drops the tariffs on our steel, aluminum, on our dairy, on our lumber, and we'd be happy to drop them if President Trump dropped their tariffs. The thing is, we didn't start this at all. Right. And we're just going to keep focusing on trying to get a deal, work collaboratively with my colleagues, the governors. Major, I can tell you, I love the American people. I love the U.S. So do Canadians. And I know Americans love Canadians. It's unfortunate that President Trump went down this road because right now these tariffs are hurting American people.
And for BC Premier David Eby, it's a hard no to selling American hard liquor.
The reality is the British Columbians who are pissed off about our industry being attacked, our families losing jobs, for absolutely no reason to prefer Russian and European lumber to Canadian lumber. It's ridiculous, and the liquor won't go back on the shelf until that's addressed.
Some of Donald Trump's top people, as you heard, are not happy about this, like the tough-talking Howard Lutnick, the U.S. Commerce Secretary. He was grilled by Democrats in Washington this week. They keep questioning why he keeps insulting Canadians. Democrats say that's hurting American business.
We have a lot of businesses in New Hampshire, small businesses who work on both sides of the border. We have all those Canadian visitors who are not coming because of your comments and comments by the administration. How does that help our economy?
It is outrageous that Canada will not put U.S. spirits on the shelf. It is insulting.
It is.
And disrespectful to America that they won't
Absolutely.
even put...
And my husband has an interest in a company that has American spirits. And they won't do it because of the insults from this president and comments like yours.
According to the Office of the U.S. Trade Representative, the boycott on U.S. liquor sales in Canada has led to a 70% drop on sales of U.S. alcoholic beverages in this country between March and December of last year. Sales went from more than $200 million down to just $60 million. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
Critical thinking is not dead.
Now You Know with Rob Snow
Returns on News Radio.
He's our expert in communications, crisis communications, political communications, branding, and leadership. Barry McLoughlin is the president of TLC, Transformational Leadership Consultants, offices in Ottawa and Washington. He teaches at the University of Ottawa's Professional Development Institute and at Cape Breton University's Shannon School of Business. Follow him on his Substack, listen to his podcast, and you can hear him here every Friday with me. A couple of disappointed Ottawa Senators fans. Hello, Barry McLoughlin.
I'm licking my wounds today. That's for sure, Rob.
That was a tough one. That's a tough one. Well, we'll get him tomorrow.
Yeah, you sure have.
Prime Minister Carney held an event in Ottawa yesterday. The issue Canada-U.S. trade was raised by news reporters. Amid reports, the Trump administration wants concessions from Canada in order to move these negotiations ahead. He was more aggressive, I would say, on the American position than he's been in the past. Let's listen to a little bit of this.
Secretary Letnick, last week, you said about Canada's economic strategy.
We want to hear the Prime Minister, please.
Just back to the bourbon ban. Last time I checked...
Was he? Wait, yeah, go ahead.
Well, last time I checked, Mr. Ford has a fair amount of control over the LCBO, even though I appreciate it's independent. But you told him to cool it on the ad that caused a lot of trouble. What if this alcohol thing...
And how did that work? Did he listen?
Yeah. But what if this alcohol thing...
I was right, by the way.
Well, what if this alcohol thing becomes more than an irritant? Look,
you know what's an irritant? 50% tariff on steel, 50% tariff on aluminum, 25% tariff on automobiles, all the tariffs on forest products. Those are more than irritants. Those are violations of our trade deal. Okay?
Okay. What do you think about his tone from the Prime Minister?
Yeah, that he was taking the glove off on that one, that's for sure. And in fact, he pointed his finger as he went through that. He picked up, and that's what he does sometimes when he gets a little annoyed, he picks up on a word in the question. Irritant, bingo. That was the key theme that he launched. I don't think he went into that news availability there planning to say any of what he said. But he was clearly primed for that. And it shows you that bubbling, like he's a calm, cool guy, no question about it, right? But under that surface is a guy that has a very strong set of feelings about this. And he's doing well, actually, not to overly verbalize those. But this actually did break through the surface. We haven't seen this since maybe the election campaign. So this is, it shows you that at some point there is a line. And I think he also realized in the political zeitgeist in Canada, he's getting a lot of hits. You see that on social media and from Poilievre on rupture, in effect blaming him somehow for the rupture. You're going to China, you're going to Europe, instead you should be, So you can see where he's probably, to use the word fed up, he probably is very close to the line of that. He's got to watch it, of course, because you can't go in with emotions with a guy like Trump. You have to really maintain your cool. So he came close to that there.
Yeah. Well, I think he also has to try and impress upon people that he's working on it, because some people are questioning the results so far because there haven't been any.
Yeah, I think that that's correct. I notice he's not using what I would call the nuclear bomb message, which is to speak through that camera, not just to Canadians complaining about, to Americans complaining about these tariffs, but actually to say, and keep in mind who is paying ultimately for these tariffs. They are nothing short of taxes. That's what they are. And to the American people, it is unfortunate that this has been added to, you have to manage in the end in your household. And that is deeply unfortunate. It is not at all what our goal is. And indeed, I think that has to be underscored. Like, nobody mentions that anymore. It's very important to say who's paying for it. Americans actually don't fully believe they're paying for it.
Well, if Trump is public enemy number one for some Canadians, I think Howard Lutnick might be public enemy number two. This is the U.S. Commerce Secretary who said Canada, they suck just a week ago or so. He was before the U.S. Senate Appropriations Committee hearing on Wednesday. He was grilled by a Democrat from New Hampshire, Senator Jeanne Shaheen. Let's listen to a little bit of this. I'd like your thoughts on this. We won't play it all, but we'll play some of it.
Secretary Lutnick, last week, you said about Canada's economic strategy, and I quote, "They suck." I believe your spokesperson then said this was about Canada's economy leeching off of the U.S. How does insulting our closest ally and neighbor help the businesses in my state of New Hampshire and states all across this country who are hurting because of the loss of Canadian business and tourism?
Canada's economy leans on the incredible $30 trillion economy of America. But
there's no doubt about that, Mr. Secretary. But insulting our closest ally and neighbor who provides a lot of business, we have a lot of businesses in New Hampshire, small businesses who work on both sides of the border. We have all those Canadian visitors who are not coming because of your comments and comments by the administration. How does that help our economy?
It is outrageous that Canada will not put U.S. spirits on the shelf. It is insulting.
It is.
And disrespectful to America that they won't
Absolutely.
even put...
And my husband has an interest in...
Okay, that's enough. Thank you. You get the idea. What do you think of that, Barry?
Well, it's really, it's actually, I'm glad he did it because it's out in the open. It's just naked, nasty aggression. Totally missed. He wouldn't pass Economics 101. He doesn't even seem to, even though he was a business leader, if you want to call him that. But frankly, the ignorance behind all that is quite shocking. Okay, totally blind to all of the tariffs that they have invoked on us in violation of agreements, and had to pretend that we were some threat to their national safety in order to put these in on aluminum, steel, auto, et cetera. So it's just one big lie, and he got caught out. And I got to hand it to Senator Sheehan. She did a great job in taking them apart.
Okay. The gravy plane has been grounded, Barry. Doug Ford's gravy plane. We'll talk about that when we come back. This is News Radio.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
Back with Barry McLoughlin from TLC, Transformational Leadership Consultants. Doug Ford grounded the gravy plane. Bought a plane, defended a plane, sold the plane back to Bombardier. He still sounds like he thinks he was right about this. Let's listen to this.
So we sold the plane for the same price right back to Bombardier and said, okay, you take it back. But here nor there, it's unprecedented. Be very frank with you. You look at the U.S. states, you look at any governor, it's just unprecedented. We have no plane now, folks. And what it was is to fly firefighters up. It was for Ontario Corps. It was for OPP when they have to send a tactical team up. And it was a multi-ministerial plane, Minister of Natural Resources, so on and so forth. But anyways, here nor there, it's done. I'm flying, commercial, or we'll fly on the little puddle jumper that the OPP has.
So it's a round trip on the gravy plane. What do you think about how it all played out?
Well, it's okay. One thing is he surprised everybody. Wham! There's a $29 million, luxurious jet plane. Whoops! Maybe they'll die. Maybe that'll die out in a day or two. No, it didn't. It was clearly not going to. Also, when people are very sensitive and uncertain about what's happening in the economy, boy, you couldn't pick the worst time to slap that money. He didn't make any effort to say it's not just him flying. Okay, like I've been around with them. I mean, there's several ministers usually with them. There's several security people, a couple of staffers. So there's that. But he didn't make much of an effort to, properly explain why are you doing a jet rather than hopping on an Air Canada or Porter Air. And finally, I just think that his apology was not an apology. It was not a whoops, okay, I obviously made a mistake and I apologize. No, he was not going to do that. He defended it even as he spent a long time defending it angrily, comparing himself to U.S. governors. I think he should have thought that through. They should have written that one out for him, because that was a very, very poor apology.
As justified, and you made the case last week, Barry, there may be something to this if somebody needs to fly from, Toronto to Kapuskasing or from Ottawa to North Bay, or it's a big, big province, right? It's hard to get around. You just can't.
I know prime ministers have learned that. I remember one of them telling me specifically, when I get on a commercial jet, there's security attached to that, which puts everybody on that plane in jeopardy, okay, when you're a prime minister. So they're told not to go on commercial planes. It's not about you, sir. It's about all the people on that plane. That's a very good point. Maybe premiers don't quite follow in that, but security is always an issue. He's surrounded by security for a reason. I've been with premiers when security's been there, and it's not a minor thing. So he maybe it could have been a $15 million jet. I don't know. Is there a price point he could have used? Because that's a pretty luxurious jet. Maybe he should have leased it instead of buy it. There's a number of things he could have done. And when it's just after Trump does his $400 million free, huge plane gift from the Middle East, that's always a symbol of wealth and luxury, private jets. So I think he just didn't communicate this well at all.
Yeah, and it was just off-brand. It's off-brand from a guy,
Yep.
Him and his brother made their name in Toronto politics by vowing to end the gravy train. So once it was labeled the gravy plane, you just knew it was going to be grounded. Thank you, Barry.
Okay.
Have a great weekend. Go Sens go tomorrow, which is one win. That's all we want. One win. It's not too much to ask for. Okay. Bye-bye. Barry McLoughlin from TLC. Transformational Leadership Consultants. Tom Korski from Blacklock's Reporter. Coming up on News Radio.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
He's been minding Ottawa's business all week long. Tom Korski is back with us, the managing editor at Blacklock's Reporter. Welcome back.
Thank you, Rob.
Well, picking up where we left off over the last 2 weeks, Tom Korski, and given how the Commons committees are about to change because it's a majority government now, can you remind some of our listeners, please, about some of the material that these committees, there are more than 24 of them, and what they've uncovered over the years when the opposition held a majority on the committees?
Absolutely. It's real-time scrutiny of government appointments, spending, and contracting, and it's led to no end of trouble in the 7 years that opposition's members have had controls of the committee. Most famously, just before the last election, in fact, Randy Boissonneau, senior Liberal minister for Alberta, lost his seat when he was discovered to have really invented Cree ancestry. He called himself Strong Eagle Man. He's not Cree. And he was involved in a federal contractor, but described as in testimony that must have been another Randy. This led to the hilarious
the other Randy. That's right.
Of the other Randy. It drove Finance Minister Bill Morneau out of town after it was learned he accepted gifts from a federal contractor. It has led to RCMP investigations in the case of blacklisted suppliers in the ArriveCan, who really became millionaires on the ArriveCan sole source contracting. Rob, it's just been it's like the bombing of Coventry. Like the committees, the work that has been done has saved taxpayers a fortune.
We Charity, Trudeau Foundation, the Frank Bayless ventilator situation, one after another. But according to the government House leader now, no more of those, silly partisan games anymore, Tom Korski, right? No more silly partisan games.
Government House Leader McKinnon, that's right. In fact, he's not only tired of real-time scrutiny by opposition members of federal spending, appointments, and contracting. Just a moment ago, he's tired of talking about it. He served notice they'll invoke closure to use their floor-crossing majority to get this motion through. It's called Motion Number 9. And the motion says the cabinet has the hammer in committees, and if you don't like it, that's too bad. It will pass, and it is going to make for, I think, a pretty hot 45th Parliament.
Okay. Speaking of committees, we have an ethics committee. It has made recommendations about what Prime Minister Carney should do with his investment portfolio that is now in a blind trust. What is the recommendation?
Sell it. How's that for 19th century ethics standards? Just sell your stock portfolio if you want to be prime minister of a G7 country. Carney has declined. He has said he complied with all the rules, technically correct. The rules are not great, but believe it or not, the rules allow a prime minister to put a massive stock portfolio. It runs to 16 pages. Stock in Canadian Pacific Railway, MasterCard, federally regulated companies, federal contractors, you name it. And he puts that in a blind trust, air quotes, blind trust under a trustee of his choosing. None of this he disclosed until after he won an election in 2025. And Parliament went into summer recess. This is on the level. I'm not describing Zaire. That's the state of the Conflict of Interest Act in Canada. The Liberal majority now in the House didn't even want this committee report. They voted against it. But that won't happen again. They opposed the committee report. That won't happen again. And the committee says very simply, this is not just for Mark Carney, every future prime minister, for the love of Mike. If you want to lead a G7 country, you can't dabble in stocks at the same time. It's a full-time job.
Okay. Speaking of committees, that's kind of a theme for us today. The ArriveCan people, the people behind the development of that ArriveCan app, tried to challenge the internal report on alleged wrongdoing. What happened with that?
They have lost successively in federal court, and they just lost again with a federal judge. These are two ArriveCan executives, formerly with Canada Border Services Agency. They were the only people who were disciplined. They were suspended for their involvement. They admitted to they were drinking with the contractors, and it was free, but they always denied, and it had nothing to do with me, these gross cost overruns and the mysterious disappearance of records. They went to a federal judge and said, we would like twice. One is we would like to quash internal report, and we would like to have a grievance heard that the investigation internally was biased. And a judge said, get out. It's interesting, Rob. That internal report from Canada Border Services Agency, we know it's 360 pages. We know the word bribery appears, alleged bribery, and we know it's called the Preliminary Statement of Facts. It's never been made public. All these years later, we don't know what the Canada Border Services Agency knew 3 years ago about shenanigans involving this scam.
Okay. Speaking of committees, we've talked about this project before, Mercy Wind Farm project, south shore of Nova Scotia, which is getting massive amounts of government money, loans, tax breaks, firms with very close ties to powerful Nova Scotia Liberals. The question has always been raised, if this is such a great project, why can't you go to a private lender, a bank, what have you, an investment bank, and get your financing? Why do you have to rely on the government for your investment into this project? What was learned at the committee about that?
This is a great example. I'm very happy you mentioned this. This is $206 million, went from the taxpayer-owned Canada Infrastructure Bank to various brothers, sons-in-law of former Liberal MPs. And the head of the chief executive of the infrastructure bank was compelled by opposition members to explain the financing arrangements. He wrote in to the committee, said, well, that's confidential, but I can tell you no bank was interested, they wouldn't touch it, and this thing would never get financing if the taxpayer didn't finance it. Why would that be, MPs asked? Because the risk is overwhelming. And in fact, they don't know when there's a return. The infrastructure bank says they'll stick around for 15 years with no interest, waiting for these proponents to possibly make a dime. This is the thing. Rob,
that's extraordinary.
It's almost $250 million for love, honestly.
Yes. And by the project's own admission, it will create 200 temporary construction jobs. That is, that's it. And there are other tax breaks there as well, clean energy tax breaks, but the investment from the infrastructure bank is $206 million for 200 jobs. I mean, you can do the math. It's $1 million a job. When we come back, this is News Radio.
There is no question Rob won't get answered.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues
on News Radio.
Tom Korski's here every Friday. He's the managing editor at Blacklock's Reporter. Tough times in the traditional TV news business, Tom. What did Bell Media say about how the CTV News Network is doing?
The Vice President, Richard Gray, responsible for CTV News, testifying at the Commons Heritage Committee, said the network lost $40 million last year on local news operations. And he said, when prompted by a former CTV employee, now MP Kevin Waugh from Saskatoon, that this was a time of fear for some employees looking over their shoulders at MP Waugh. Replies Vice President Gray, I quote him accurately, there is fear that exists in our operations. He replied, fear. 40 million. Television is going through a change. The CRTC and Department of Heritage have documented this in fascinating surveys. Try to find someone under the age of 40 who watches an evening newscast. Good luck to you. The demographics of the television audience are just catastrophic.
Yeah. In fact, I was surprised from reading your reporting. According to Richard Gray from Bell Media, the CTV News Network, it hasn't made money in 13 years. It's been losing money for 13 years.
In local operations, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
They've said that in various submissions to parliamentary committees. That was one of the Senate National Finance Committee. Oh, it's cable cutting. And how many people are keeping their cable because of sports? They like the sports. You can't get the sports on very many legally other platforms. Television news is, and it's funny. We always thought
it's dire. The local television news. I mean, it's not inaccurate to say it's dire. I mean, it is dire right now. Okay, it could be worse. I guess it could be Canada Post. My gosh, there could be tens of thousands of jobs cut at Canada Post by the sounds of things, Tom. What have you learned?
The CEO in the annual report to Parliament said 30,000 jobs will be eliminated through attrition over a period of approximately 9 years, but said, this is after the talk about catastrophic loss, $1.5 billion last year. That used to be a provincial deficit, $1.5 billion. Some changes will raise concerns, said the CEO, Doug Ettinger. The Cabinet has submitted a plan to Cabinet from Canada Post, on serious cuts. And that plan has not been made public, though it was presented to Cabinet last November. There's something going on, Rob. There's something big happening at Canada Post, and it's not going to be good news.
Yeah. Okay. Now, finally, I mean, it's a great time to be a sports fan. You've got the Jays. If you're into the NHL playoffs, it's a great time to be a sports fan. But gosh, try to escape the gambling ads. Good luck to you. They're everywhere, all the time, and the government is giving it a look. What's up with that?
A bill came out of the Senate, was passed by the Senate. This was a private bill, just got a second reading in the House of Commons, will go to committee. It's got a good chance of passing. It mandates that Cabinet look at some sort of regulation on sports betting, single event sports betting. But the problem is, Rob, that, gee, why didn't someone think of that 5 years ago when Parliament repealed a criminal ban on bookmaking, really, single event sports betting, that dated from 1892? They were told in the day, and MPs and senators weren't interested in listening. There were experts, Center for Addiction, professional sports analysts who said, don't do this. I'm telling you, there's going to be many consequences, and they didn't listen. So now that the barn door is open and the horse is gone, they're thinking about some sort of form of regulation. It's not good, Rob.
Okay. Well, your material's good, Tom, and I always thank you for being here every Friday. We'll get caught up next week. Thanks again.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, Tom Korski, minding Ottawa's business. Glad someone is. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
You have questions
Now You Know with Rob Snow has the answers.
on News Radio.
Well, remember when gas prices went down on Monday because of the suspension of the federal excise tax on fuel? Yeah. Well, about that, fuel prices are up to end the work week. Gasoline prices up about a nickel in many parts of the country, a nickel a liter. Diesel prices in some places are up about a dime a liter. So as a result, across Nova Scotia, gasoline prices averaging $1.77. Diesel prices holding steady, though, at about $2.06. In many major Ontario cities, Ottawa, Kitchener, gasoline will run you about $1.74 these days. Diesel about $2.04. In Alberta, gasoline prices across Calgary up to about $1.64. Diesel prices actually down just a little bit, 186.9, but not much relief. And really, when you think about it, just simply punishing gas prices across Greater Vancouver, $2.09 a liter, diesel $2.60 a liter, just incredible. In the United States, the average price for gasoline remains above $4 US a gallon, $4.12 US a gallon. That's $1.50 a liter in Canadian dollars. California at $5.90 US a gallon is the highest of any state in the United States, $2.15 a liter in Canadian dollars. Oklahoma with the lowest gas price, $3.45 a gallon, $1.26 a liter in Canadian dollars. Oil prices have been all over the place this week, with WTI trading as low as $85 US and as high as $97 US, and they're about just shy of $94 US right now, $93.90 US a barrel. So win the lottery, never worry about gas prices again. Tonight's Lotto Max jackpot is $50 million. And they've changed the Lotto Max now. The price went up, but there are more prizes. There are more numbers. So there are two additional prizes of $1 million each, but there are also 50 prizes of $100,000 each. Who couldn't use $100,000? Saturday's Gold Ball jackpot, $34 million, along with the traditional 649 draw, $5 million. In sports, the Jays are back in action and back at home in Toronto tonight. The Jays are starting a 3-game series against the Cleveland Guardians, and then they follow that up with another 3 games at home against the Boston Red Sox. But the Jays are returning to Rogers Center with a record of 10 wins and 14 losses. They're sitting 4th in the AL East. They're 5.5 games back of the first-place New York Yankees. And the Jays, who played so well at Rogers Center last season, are playing .500 baseball at home right now. Max Scherzer gets the call tonight for Toronto. He is sporting a record these days so far, 1-2, but the ERA 7.16. 7.16. Goodness gracious, Max. Game time tonight, 7:07 Eastern. Catch all the action on Sportsnet, Sportsnet Plus, and all across the Blue Jays radio network. Of course, Rogers owns the Toronto Blue Jays. Rogers also owns this radio station. In the NHL playoffs, lots of action tonight as well. Habs and Lightning. Game 3 in Montreal. That is at 7 o'clock Eastern time. That series all tied up at 1. And later on, it's the Oilers and the Ducks in Anaheim. That series also tied at win it apiece. That's at 10 o'clock Eastern, of course, 8 o'clock in Alberta. And tonight's other matchup features the Golden Knights, the Utah Mammoth. That series also tied at 1 win each, and that's a 9:30 Eastern time start. Coming up right after the latest breaking news, it's Talkback. It's the Friday free-for-all Talkback. We'll have some conversation starters, but you can start the conversation right now if you want. 1-833-668-2577. We are wide open line, open topic on a Friday on Talkback, and we'd love to hear from you. Let's get going with your calls right after the latest breaking news. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. And today it's the Friday free-for-all. We don't come up with the topics on Fridays. We always have a few ready to go, but we always prefer to know what's on your mind. So what's on your mind? What do you want to talk about? If you want to talk about something that's been in the news, there's always news. Lots of news this week. If you want to talk about something you think should be in the news, you feel free to raise it here. Whatever it happens to be, it can be serious. It can be not so serious. We have a phone line for you. All of our phone lines are open right now. The number to call, 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. And as always, a special appeal to first-time callers if you have never called before. Just mention that, and we'll make your call a priority. Once again, 1-833-668-2577. We're wide open right now. I want to start with the booze ban. The Trump administration, mad with Canada because so many provincial governments, 8 of them, have banned the sale of U.S. wine and spirits. This has been happening for, a year now? They've banned the sale of U.S. wine and spirits from the shelves of the government-owned liquor stores across the country. It's been all over the news this week with suggestions from top people in the Trump administration. It's going to be very hard for Canada to move these trade negotiations forward as long as these booze boycotts remain in effect. The only 2 provinces that haven't done this are Alberta and Saskatchewan. Every other province in the country has pulled U.S. liquor from its store shelves. And the premiers that have been speaking with the news media this week on this issue have said they have no intention of putting those products back on the shelves, not until there's some tariff relief from the Trump administration. So you have people like Doug Ford in Ontario and David Eby in British Columbia saying until there's some movement from the U.S. side, the booze is staying off the shelves. We've talked about this before. Let's talk about it again. What do you think of this? Do you support or oppose the continued boycott by most of the Canadian premiers of U.S. wine and spirits? The Prime Minister was asked about this issue this week during his event in Ottawa yesterday. He sort of passed it off to the premiers, said it's their decision. But he was rather firm that the Americans know what the Canadian issues are, and he knows the gripes that the Americans have, and that this alcohol boycott, it's sort of a side issue. And Mark Carney seemed to suggest the much bigger issue is the punishing tariffs on major Canadian industries. Let's listen to a little bit of the Prime Minister again here.
Last time I checked, Mr. Ford has a fair amount of control over the LCBO, even though I appreciate it's independent. But you told him to cool it on the ad that caused a lot of trouble. What if this alcohol thing...
And how did that work? Did he listen?
Yeah. But what if this alcohol thing...
I was right, by the way.
Well, what if this alcohol thing becomes more than an irritant? Look,
you know what's an irritant? Yeah. 50% tariff on steel, 50% tariff on aluminum, 25% tariff on automobiles, all the tariffs on forest products. Those are more than irritants. Those are violations of our trade deal. Okay? The client of American producers, which ultimately there's a board for the LCBO, for the SAQ, for the Manitoba. There's not just one. Huh? They make those decisions. And they make those decisions in a judgment. Yes, there's different governance structures, and yes, surprise, surprise, the Premier of Ontario is influential with the LCBO. Okay. But he's the client. He's also the duly elected Premier of Ontario. He's got a majority. And he's taking a view, which, by most indications is supported by the vast majority of the population.
So you hear it there. It's Doug Ford's call, it's Wab Kinu's call, it's the Premier of Quebec's call, it's David Eby's call, but the real issue is the U.S. tariffs. We had a deal with Trump. He broke the deal. But this is a $600 billion trading relationship on the line here. And one of the big issues for the Americans is this booze ban, and they want something done about it. And the Prime Minister doesn't want to seem to give an inch on that, nor do any of the premiers. Is that wise? What do you think of that decision? 1-833-668-2577. In many ways, this week it's like taking a trip back in time in the news. Booze bans, trade wars. And one of the big stories last year, and you had lots of opinions at the time on Talkback when this was happening, in real time, the Nova Scotia woods ban. You remember that Premier Tim Houston banned people from going into the woods because of the fire risk? Made national news at the time. Wasn't long after that, the government of New Brunswick did the same thing, banned people from going into the woods. No hiking, no camping. It was all banned. So this was challenged in court by a guy from Cape Breton. And he went into the woods quite on purpose, filmed it all, and he was fined $28,000 because he wanted to challenge it in court. And he won, and the Premier lost. And a judge in Nova Scotia said the government of Nova Scotia violated everyone's charter rights, specifically mobility rights, Section 6 of the Charter of Rights. And the judge admonished the government, saying it didn't even take mobility rights into consideration at all, saying it was unreasonable, it was too broad, it was too sweeping, it was unconstitutional. So yesterday, the Premier of Nova Scotia was asked about that and basically said, well, you know what? I do it again. Let's listen to some of that. Premier Tim Houston.
And that was the woods ban. That was completely appropriate in those circumstances, in that moment, based on the information that I had. Now, months and months later, almost essentially a world away in the wintertime, a judge has decided that maybe something different should have been done. That's that judge. I respect that judge's decision, but I respectfully also acknowledge that we were dealing with information in an emergency situation, and we did what we thought was necessary at that time.
Will you appeal the decision?
I don't think so. I'm not aware of an appeal being prepared. It's kind of come and gone. And as we move forward, I, as Premier, will certainly look at circumstances that are in front of me at any given moment in time. And I will always do what is necessary to keep people safe, to keep property safe every single time. We'll make that decision. We'll do that again if necessary.
We'll do that again. And if necessary, the Premier says, well, do what? Do what? Violate the charter rights of the people of Nova Scotia? Look, folks, you know it. I know it. Wildfire news will soon be the news. Let's hope it's not bad this season the way it was last season and 2 seasons ago, 3 seasons ago. But the Premier of Nova Scotia, despite a judge ruling that what he did was unconstitutional, says he would do the same thing again if confronted by the same circumstances again. We all have the benefit of hindsight now. Given this judge's ruling, given the comments you just heard from the Premier of Nova Scotia, was Tim Houston right? He insists he was right, but was he right, in your opinion, to ban everyone from going into the woods because of wildfire risk under the threat of a $25,000 fine? Booze bans, woods bans. Just a pair of conversation starters here today on the Friday Free-for-All Talkback. 1-833-668-2577 and have your say on News Radio. It's not just any talkback. It's the Friday free-for-all talkback, so we're wide open today. Pick a topic. We'll roll with it. Let's start with Eric. He's in Halifax today. Hello, Eric.
Hey, how are you doing this afternoon, Rob?
Yeah, very good, Eric. Thank you. What's on your mind?
I agree with Timmy. It only takes one idiot because they do a lot of eating in the woods and all that when they're camping out, and all it takes is one spark because around July and August, our woods are so dry, it isn't funny. It wouldn't take much to set the woods on fire. So I agree with Timmy. Go for it, Timmy. Never mind what those other bureaucrats say.
Well, it's not a bureaucrat. This is a judge saying your rights have been violated. That doesn't bother you at all?
No, because if the judge got his house burned down, what would he think?
Okay, all right. Sure enough.
Okay. Ottawa's going to upset tonight. Philadelphia's going to host Pittsburgh. And Montreal's going to handle Tampa Bay.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you think about all this?
Well, I'm disappointed that the Senators appear to be on the verge of being swept for the second season in a row in the NHL playoffs after they played their hearts out in the second half of the season just to make it there. They had a good season, 99 points. It's a pretty good season to squeak into last place in the Eastern Conference. But that Carolina team they're a good team. There's no doubt about it.
Carolina's just awesome. Yeah, Carolina shouldn't have no problem with hosting the team that they're playing, But I mean, everybody's got to beat Colorado. Colorado is the what broke the camel's back type thing. And that team in Colorado is just awesome. But
another team that impresses me is Minnesota. I like the way Minnesota plays hockey as well, but that's a really tough first round series with those two teams, Dallas and Minnesota.
I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the Canadian teams. Montreal and Edmonton can make some noise. And I'll tell you, you heard it here first. Ottawa's not going to go down without a fight. They'll throw everything but the kitchen sink there tonight. And if they get that win, they'll have some momentum going back to Carolina. What is it? Carolina.
Yeah, Carolina. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Eric. The Senators game is tomorrow afternoon. Believe me, I know when that game's on. John in Calgary's up next on Talkback Friday Free for All. John, hi there.
Hey, Rob, how are you?
Yeah, very good, John. What's on your mind?
Good. Hey, I lost my business last year as a result of the tariffs, the counter tariffs that Canada imposed on the U.S. And there doesn't seem to be too much noise in the media about the Liberals paying back all the businesses that they took tariffs from. Now that the U.S. has to pay back all the businesses that they claim tariffs from. So, a lot of the businesses that have closed down, we have a 209% increase in foreclosures and closing businesses in Canada at the moment. And another scary stat is a 49% decrease in people opening businesses in Canada. So for a small business, the environment's not great, but I don't see any outcry in the media for the tariffs that the Liberal government took of our consumers to be paid back to the businesses, or any way or means of that being done. So
how much do you estimate that cost your business, John? How much do you estimate that cost your business?
About $800,000 in 6 months.
$800,000?
Yeah, and that was the complete downfall of the business. We were an importer of 100% American products that have been going for over 35 years, and it took 6 months of tariffs of 25% to close us down. We lost 5 branches and 75 staff, and about 150 subcontractors all went out of business in a 6-month period. Yeah,
I think you called me before. Was it Windows and Doors?
Did, yeah.
You were in Windows and Doors? Or?
That is correct. Yeah. So we closed down in October last year, had to liquidate because the businesses don't make 25%, and you can't pass that cost on to a consumer. You start looking at the logistics and all the other things that are being thrown at Canadians at the moment, with the dollar at $1.38, $1.40, and also the gas prices now getting products to customers. But yeah, the government was very happy to take all the money away from us. I see the Supreme Court has made the American government pay back, and I was wondering if the Carney government was going to pay it back to all the businesses that had to forfeit this, and how we'd get it back to the consumer to make us more cost effective. Because anyone who absorbed it and put the prices up has not reduced their prices for sure.
Yeah, I understand. Thank you so much. I mean, there's no indication that there would be similar action from the Canadian government on, compensating people for tariffs that were paid. Of course, the reason that happened in the United States is because the court ruled that the tariffs were unjustified. Thank you for your call. All the best to you, sir. Yeah, I remember your call when you said you were on the brink, and I'm sorry it's turned out the way it has. Friday Free for All Talkback. We have 5 lines available there, folks. You can join our discussion. You can start one of your own. We'd love to hear from you today. Get us into the weekend. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Friday Free for All Talkback. Timmy in Two Hills, Alberta. Hello, Timmy.
Hey, Rob. I just wanted to say kudos to you for having, common sense. I was a little bit shocked to hear your first caller say that he's okay with our rights being violated there, and it sounded like you were too. Unfortunately, though, I think that is representative of about 50% of Canadians, and this isn't going to end well for Canada. I mean, if we're going to alienate or if we're going to go against America, we're going to get crushed. We stand no chance, and they're our biggest trading partner. And, you're the only talk show host I listen to because, like I said, you seem to have common sense. Whereas a lot of the other radio shows, they're very, very anti-American, elbows up, and it's not going to end well for us. What do you think about that?
Well, I'm wondering, just on the issue in Nova Scotia, I'm quite frankly appalled at the comments from the Premier, and I understand his position, but how he would so quickly dismiss a judge's ruling on a charter right as though it was not of any consequence at all. It troubles me deeply when I hear that from political leaders. I don't like that. I don't like it when the government just waves away the Charter of Rights and Freedoms like it's some sort of inconvenience to their
same
worldview.
Same thing happened with the trucker convoy. Same thing. It keeps happening, and it's like I just kudos to you because you see what's happening. We're basically becoming a tyrannical. If we're going to,
well, I wouldn't say that, but and on the booze ban, what I have been saying all along, and this is the question that I'm putting to the listeners. Okay, is this the hill you want to die on? Banning alcohol,
exactly.
Banning bourbon. Is this what or supply management and agriculture, which impacts the vast majority of farmers in this country are not under supply management. The vast majority of the agri economy in this country is not under supply management. Okay.
Yeah.
We have 9,000 dairy farmers, most of them in Quebec. That is who we are catering to when we are defending this antiquated supply management system that we have. Are these the hills you want to die on in this trade dispute with the Americans? If it is, fine. Fine. But
I just want to remind everyone, Canada, we are protected by the United States, and if we didn't have the United States, we would probably not even exist. And it's just a fact. People need to get over it and swallow their pride, and we need to cooperate with our biggest trading partner, or we will no longer be a country.
Thank you. 1-833-668-2577. It's the Friday Free for All Talkback. Latest breaking news next on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
On the Friday Free for All Talkback, welcoming your discussions today on any issue that you want to raise. We have a couple in the mix already. Booze bans, woods bans in Nova Scotia. Rick is in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia today. Hi, Rick.
Hi, Rob. Look, I love passing on stuff that I find out to you and your listeners there. I saw an ad for what I thought was a revolutionary idea, but of course it comes from China. Anyway, they have an EV, a full electric EV, not a hybrid, that has a range of 1,150 kilometers. How did they do that? Well, they put an engine, a small engine of some kind in it that runs on gas, but doesn't run the car. It charges the battery. So that simple technological twist removes all range anxiety that you could possibly have. I have a 18-year-old Toyota, probably has a range of 650 clicks, maybe a bit more, just with gas. So you can find a gas station pretty much anywhere. So anyway, I just thought that that would be an interesting thing, and also in conjunction with that, a very proud person, Mark Carney supporter, listed the things that Mark Carney has done, and one of them was remove the 100% tariff on Chinese electric vehicles. I don't know that to be true, but this person seemed to be very...
Well, yeah, it's come from, it was 100%. It was 100%. Now it's 6%. 6%.
Oh, okay. Well, I think we can live with that. Yeah. Well, that
sure.
would change the equation, in my view, in terms of Chinese electric vehicles. And,
I guess, but can you how should I say? Can you look at yourself in the mirror knowing that you might be driving a vehicle that was made with slave labor? That's what I would ask
look,
you.
Look, there's 103 billion people in China. Do you think Canadians know what that's really like? I mean, we don't really have. Do you look at pictures on the internet of Chinese cities? I mean, it's all
sure.
When you say it's when you say it's slave labor, I mean, I don't know. The average
forced labor, by people who are put in internment camps for their religious beliefs, like the Uyghurs.
Well, maybe. We did that to the Japanese.
Not maybe. It's well documented, sir. This is what is happening.
Look, let me put it this way.
The labor, the products of their labor are part of the supply chain used to make these EVs in China. No.
Let me ask you this question.
No. Go ahead.
What do we not buy from China? Okay, every damn thing I buy is made in China. So, in my view, that would put your argument out on the clothes.
Well, it's it's one thing to buy a press board piece of furniture or a $300 television. It's quite another financial outlay for a $35,000 or $60,000 vehicle. And I'm just speaking for myself. You will never ever see me behind the wheel of a vehicle made in China. I just will not do it. I just think it's wrong.
Okay. Well.
All right.
Anyway.
You know what I drive? I just got a new to me car. I bought a Toyota RAV4. You know why? Because it's made in Canada, sir. All right.
Yeah.
Made in Canada. It's a fine vehicle. Thank you, Rick. Thank you. Bye-bye. Yeah. Keith in Nova Scotia. Hello, Keith.
How you doing today, Rob?
Yeah, very good, Keith. What's on your mind?
Just wanted to make a couple of comments, just my opinion on this banning of the woods because of the forest fire situations that could arise. I kind of agree with him for doing that, but I would maybe like to see when what's going to happen first. Like, we got a lot of snow and some rain here over the winter and that. So the woods won't take long for them to dry out. So maybe instead of just making a ban, I think maybe give it some time to see what's going to take place, what kind of conditions the woods will be in. I have a legit concern about fire. I lost my home to a fire when I was a teenager, and I've been in the woods and helped fight a fire. And I don't know if you've ever fought a forest fire, but it's a dirty, dangerous job. And, last summer there was a fire not too far from where I live. I could see the smoke from my building. That's how close it was.
Sure.
So I was pretty concerned about that. And that was set in the woods by the homeless camping or something that was there.
Yes, I remember that one. I do remember that one. Yeah.
Once they get going, Rob, once they get going, if you don't get on them and hammer them right away, and there's wind behind it, they can cover territory really quickly.
I appreciate that, sir. The question is, and what the judge said was unconstitutional, is despite that risk, you have to take into consideration that people in Canada have mobility rights under Section 6. And, Eric called earlier and said, well, all it takes is one idiot. Okay, so you ban 1 million people from the woods because of the potential actions of one idiot?
Yeah, well, I can sort of see that argument, but I still would be very leery. Like I said, maybe try this out and see how the woods are this summer. But if things get tinder dry, and there's a good chance that something's going to, and there will be fires here. But there will be fires this summer.
Of course.
But if you get a major blaze like they had down in Tantallon or down in Barrington a couple of years ago, then, I kind of think they should watch it real careful before they just decide to go in the woods.
I appreciate that. Thank you. The question is, given the risk, does that justify the response from the government? And the judge has said, no, it does not. And it's too broad, it's too sweeping. Your response has to be more nuanced than that. You have to take the charter into consideration, sir. Appreciate your point of view, though. It's a popular one. It was a popular one last summer for the premier when we were talking about it. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Karen in Calgary's up next on the Friday Free for All Talkback. Hello, Karen.
Hey, Rob. How you doing?
Hanging in there, Karen. How about yourself?
Well, you can call me Eileen today because it's 90-kilometer winds here.
Yes, I've heard that. Yeah. Hang on to Grandma. She might blow away there. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, I was just wondering, has the Liberal government decided to quash all of the committees and the persons on the committees? I thought that was supposed to stay in place for the entire duration of the Parliament sessions.
Well, they're going to reconstitute the committees, and what's going to happen is, first of all, the New Democrats don't have any MPs on these committees because they don't have official party status, so they're out of the equation. The number of Bloc MPs on the committees will stay the same. The number of Conservative MPs on the committees will stay the same, and the Liberals are going to give themselves a few more seats so they can have the majority on the committees, because they say we have the majority in Parliament, so we're going to have the majority on the committees too.
And are they going to be as transparent with Canadians on these committees as they've been so far? What's
well, it will be difficult. It will be difficult. Say the opposition wants to call a witness that maybe the government doesn't want to hear. Well, then the Liberals will have the majority and they'll just vote against calling that witness. Let's say the government wants documents produced about, take, for example, previous scandals, SNC, Lavalin or the We Charity or the Trudeau Foundation or Arrive Can, all of these things. They want to see documents. Show us the documents. You have to produce the documents. Well, the Liberals will have the majority and they'll just vote against that. No, we don't have to produce any documents.
So there's going to be no filibustering at all then? We should expect zero filibustering from the Liberals.
Well, the Liberals will command the majority of the votes. So whatever motion is put before the committee, if the Liberals don't like it, they'll vote against us, and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah, that's democracy. Wow. It's only taken
it will speed up. I mean, it'll speed up the legislative process. Whatever the Liberals want to pass, they'll pass it through the House. It'll get kicked off to committee. It'll pass through the committee, and then it'll go back for third reading and off to the Senate, where they have a massive majority in the Senate.
Yes.
So it is going to speed things up that way. Yeah. But as for it will just be, it's not that it will be impossible to kind of sniff out government malfeasance. It won't be impossible, but it won't be as easy for the opposition to do it as it has been in the past. That's how I would explain it to you, Karen. Going to move along. Thank you, though. Yeah, let's take a call again from Halifax. First-time caller, Mike, is on the line. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Rob. I'm getting old, buddy. I forget why I was sitting on hold, but I want to talk to you about.
It's okay.
My train
Lots of stuff
gone.
on the go.
Well,
train of thought is
I was
gone.
thinking, what else can? Oh yeah, I was thinking, what else can I talk to you about? I'm guessing. What do you think about the $20 million a year spaceport in Nova Scotia? Have you seen that?
I have seen that. I interviewed the company that this is going back many years ago when that company was first starting up, and they seem rather bullish on it that they can make this into a serious business to launch. Well, I mean, the hot business in that space right now are what's known as LEO, low Earth orbit satellites. Right? That's what's big right now. That's like Starlink style satellites,
so far, all I've seen so far was social media posts. So I'll be honest, I haven't done much research on it, but it's just from what you can see on social media, it's literally a 30 by 40 concrete pad with a couple shipping containers. Like,
that's right. That's right. That's all it is right now.
Like, is that all it's going to be, or what's the deal with it?
Well, no, they have plans for a whole industry because what they want is to kind of have aerospace sovereignty for Canada. Canada used to be a leader in things like launching satellites. The United States, let's back up a bit here. After the United States and what was then the USSR, they launched satellites into space, and it was a big thing, and the space race was on. You know what the third country in the world to launch a satellite into space was? It was Canada. Back in the 60s with Alouette 1.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it was a huge moment in Canadian space history, the launch of Alouette 1. And now, because of our relationship with the United States, and the more private delivery of the space industry with things like Jeff Bezos' company and Elon Musk's company, the push is on to make sure Canada has its own space industry, its own private space industry. That's what the vision is here. Is this concrete slab? Where is it? Near Port Hawkesbury, I think. It's near Port Hawkesbury, somewhere around there.
Canso area, I believe.
In Canso, yeah. That's the vision for that. And there's money to be made, I'm telling you, and the government is throwing lots of money at it into companies like Telesat, for example, which is big into launching satellites. They really see business opportunities specifically in low Earth orbit satellites. The kind of satellites that are used for like the Starlink internet service, for example. That's the vision. Whether it's anything more than a concrete slab 10 years from now, I've seen lots of crazy ideas to try and create jobs in Cape Breton, sir, when I was growing up there. So we'll see what comes of it. Thank you, though, for your call. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
I believe we are going back to Calgary. Bill is in Calgary. Hello, Bill.
Good afternoon, sir. Thanks for taking my call. I would
My
say
pleasure,
that every parliamentarian should put down their pencils and listen to your show every day.
I agree.
Yeah. Anyway.
We'll straighten them out one by one, Bill.
Pardon?
We'll straighten them out one by one.
Okay. So one call, one subject. I'm glad that the postal debacle came up again today. I meant to call last Friday, but got busy working. So I would propose that it's a failed enterprise. So it's got to go the equivalent of Chapter 11 in Canada. It could be a combination of the Reagan treatment of the air traffic controllers back in the day.
I don't think it needs to go that way. As you know, apparently maybe you don't know. When the air traffic controllers were on strike in the United States, and Ronald Reagan said, if you don't show up for work, you're all going to be fired, and he fired them all. That was an illegal strike. It was a wildcat strike. So they weren't in any position to be on strike, so they basically sacrificed their jobs. This is quite different with Canada Post. They're voting on a contract right now, and they have the collective bargaining right to reject that contract or accept that contract. I think I'm with you, Canada. These workers at Canada Post, and by the way, this contract offers them raises at a company that's losing. Lost last year $1.5 billion. There's, for some reason, the company is still in a position to offer pay increases. I don't know another company in the world that would be able to do that. But if they reject the offer, they would be in a legal strike position. They could go right back out on strike. But the writing is on the wall. Tom Korski from Blacklock says the plan is 30,000 job cuts at Canada Post.
Well, they would be in position to strike for Canada Post if Canada Post were to still exist in its same configuration. The other thing I would point out to you would be take a look at what happened to the Deutsche Post. It was privatized. It didn't happen overnight. It took a few years. It became a very, very profitable company. They bought a courier company and became one of the leading courier companies in the world.
Yeah, very interesting. And, and the Royal Mail as well has been sold to private interests. But people will say, well, Canada's vastly different. Look how big Canada is.
It's time to talk back.
On Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now.
And have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Talkback, Friday Free for All Talkback. I should say in about 10 minutes from now, 15 minutes from now, my old friend Professor Ian Lee from Carleton University, we're going to give him a call. He has been away for, almost a month now. He's been in China. He's been in Japan. So we're going to catch up with him, get his little travel log, I guess, some highlights from some of his travels, what he's seen while he's been over there. And as well, I want to ask him about some of the trade stuff that's been going on. So don't miss that. It's been a while since we've heard from my old friend, the professor. But we're going back to Windsor, Nova Scotia right now. Steve is there. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Rob. How are you?
Good, Steve.
Good to talk to
What's
you.
up? Yeah, good to talk to you.
I just wanted to talk to you briefly about the ruling by the judge on going into the woods in Nova Scotia.
By all means.
And I find the operative word was that it was unreasonable. Mm-hmm. And I I think you sort of covered a little bit when you said that is he not asking for the premier to be a little bit more nuanced in what he is saying, and I do, although I think Tim Houston came out a little bit rough right now in his response to the judge, I would still think that he should have the ability to still ban people from going into the woods if there is these critical situations again, because we have no rights that don't carry some restrictions from time to time. And the issue is, and back when it first went into place last year, I thought, yeah, he can do it, but he better get it right as to the reason for why he's doing it and the wording. And the judge, I think, is saying, I'm not saying this is illegal. I'm saying that it's unreasonable, and you've got to word it differently in order to be able to make it a reasonable thing that you're asking the people to do.
Well, exactly, because there's a charter test here, right?
Yeah.
And you're right. We have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, but the rights and freedoms that are in there, they're not absolute. I mean, that charter. Right? It guarantees the rights and freedoms set out in it subject only to reasonable limits prescribed by laws can be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. Reasonable limits, demonstrably justified.
I wonder who Tim Houston can ask in the Justice Department what's reasonable. That's an interesting question for maybe that judge.
I suspect in the Nova Scotia Justice Department, he has any number of lawyers who would be well schooled at understanding the charter. Clearly, but this goes back. I don't want to walk everyone through this all. You have what is in the charter, the Oakes test. Okay.
Yes.
So step one is what the government is trying to accomplish. Is it pressing and substantial? So the government last summer was saying, well, we're trying to prevent wildfires. We're trying to prevent loss of life, loss of property. That sounds pretty pressing and substantial. Okay. And one of the cases that would have come up involved the woman who was denied entry to Newfoundland to attend her mother's funeral during the pandemic. I'm sure you remember that story.
Yeah.
Right. So that's burden number one that the government has to meet, is what you're trying to do by limiting somebody's charter rights, pressing and substantial. Then there's part two. Is it proportional? Okay. Is banning people from the woods proportional? All activities in the woods? Is that proportional? Everyone from the woods? Is that proportional? Hiking, fishing, campfires. Okay. That's one thing. Banning ATVs, maybe that's another thing. But banning everyone from the woods from doing anything in the woods, rather blunt instrument. And I think what the judge might be saying here is, well, that's a bit more difficult, and maybe you haven't made the case. It's pressing and substantial to try and prevent forest fires. Banning everyone and everything in the woods, maybe doing low risk activities in the woods. Is that proportional? As I say, tougher case to make. And then you have to say, is it rational? Is it rationally connected to the government's objectives? Is it rational to order all people out of the woods because the woods are tinder dry? And then finally, there's what's known as the minimal impairment standard. The courts have said, if a government moves to limit your freedom, it has to do that in a way that impairs those freedoms as little as possible, minimally impairing. Is there something less drastic that the government could have done? So in this case, could it have, say, put a fire ban in effect? Could it have banned ATVs or construction activity in the woods? It didn't ban construction activity in the woods, as you'll recall, and logging could continue. So, could it have run a public awareness campaign about don't do high risk activity in the woods? Run public awareness campaigns about fire safety on TV or the radio or newspapers, on social media. Right? All of these things were taken into consideration in this case, and this is a rather rare rebuke, especially since the pandemic, because there have been many cases about all the restrictions, as you well know, about that were in place during the pandemic. And in the last 5 or 6 years, whenever these cases have come before the courts, the government has almost always won, but not in this case. This is a loss for the government. So it's very interesting.
just as a final thing, I was a young man of 23 years old when Pierre Elliott Trudeau imposed the War Measures Act in Canada back in 1970. And that, if you want to talk about restrictions on our rights, they could take you off the street. Any human being they could take off the street, put him in jail for 90 days without any court appearance at all.
That's right. That's right.
And,
That's right.
And that was.
And there is a belief in academic circles that that's a reason why we have a Charter of Rights and Freedoms right now. And Pierre Trudeau didn't want a notwithstanding clause. He wanted these rights to be more absolute, and governments couldn't invoke a notwithstanding clause because he had regrets about having to suspend those civil liberties to deal with the October crisis. Yeah, it's very interesting points that you raised. Thank you so much for weighing in on that. More of your calls. Professor Ian Lee joining us. Going to give us his audio kind of slideshow about his trips through Asia. That'll be exciting. We'll talk a little bit of trade on the Friday Free for All Talkback. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Yeah, lots of lines available there. Lots of time to take your call here on the Friday Free for All Talkback, and I mean lots of issues in the mix. Sam is in Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. Hello, Sam.
Hey, Rob. Happy Friday.
Yeah, happy Friday to you, Sam.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to talk a little bit about public transit.
Public transit, okay.
Yeah. Well, you had a couple of panelists on, I think it was last Thursday, and you were discussing public transit in Nova Scotia.
Yes.
And you all kind of seemed to agree that it was a good idea. And I 100% agree. I think we really need to, in Nova Scotia, and I think really in Canada and North America in general, like, we need to sort of change our relationship with how we get around, because I mean, right now, for example, like, if you leave Halifax at rush hour on a Friday, you leave Halifax at 4 p.m. and let's say you're heading towards Dartmouth. You're on Main Street in Dartmouth. I don't know if you know which road I mean by that, but you'll see literally hundreds of cars, all heading in a straight line, all heading in the exact same direction, most of them going in that direction for the same distance, really only until the last second everybody goes their separate ways. And, it's like that with every major vein or artery or highway into and out of the city, out of Halifax. And, like, we do have this car culture in Canada and in North America, and especially in Nova Scotia. And, like, right now they're talking about doing this right now in outside of Halifax, adding another connector. I can't remember exactly where it is, somewhere on the Hammonds Plains Road, but it's going to cut through the Sandy Lake wilderness area. And it's a Band-Aid solution. Like, how many of these Band-Aids are we just going to slap all over the province before we realize, like, there's a bigger problem? You can build a new road and it might fix a little bit of congestion for 5 or 10 years, but eventually people are
you're making the induced argument demand, right? About that.
I'm not familiar with that term. So
Induced demand. Induced demand is this idea when, let's say, for example, you twin a highway or you add a lane of traffic to a highway under the belief that you will ease traffic congestion. Induced demand suggests actually you're just inducing demand for more people to use their cars to get around. And as you say, 5 years later, what's going to happen? Well, the same thing will be taking place, and traffic congestion will not be improved. You'll just have, say, 4 lanes of jammed traffic instead of the 2 lanes that you used to have. They bring this up all the time. And, say, for example, if you go to Toronto and drive around the GTA on the highways, I mean, how many lanes of traffic are there? They keep adding more and more lanes of
Yes,
traffic to the 400 series highways, and the traffic is as bad as it's ever been. But there might be a case to make, because your city has experienced such explosive growth in such a short period of time that your road infrastructure hasn't kept pace with that growth. So you might not be inducing demand, but rather bringing the infrastructure up to where it should have been by now. Now, that being said, I would be interested in whether people would be willing to take, say, regional rail, from the outskirts into the city on a regional line. I would greatly and strongly recommend the Halifax Council seriously think about things before it ever explored doing a light rail transit project. Because I covered that. That was the Evergreen Transit Project in Ottawa. We've been at that in Ottawa for close to 20 years now, sir, and it's still not done. And it has cost, well, by the time it's all said and done, it might be $10, $11, $12 billion. And it's proven to be unreliable.
So I think, even if we did upgrade our infrastructure, our road infrastructure, to the point where it could meet the demand of the present day population, I mean, what's going to happen? The population is going to grow, and then the infrastructure is going to need to be upgraded again. So it's just going to continue to be a problem, especially if people keep getting bigger and bigger vehicles, as they seem to be doing. Everybody's grocery getter is,
But one of the points I also wanted to make, and you might have some thoughts on this, Sam, and this is a point I raised, you're right, on Focus Nova Scotia a week ago yesterday, is do you have a car culture or do you have a transit culture? As I told our panelists, in Toronto, taking the subway is natural. In Montreal, taking the metro is natural. And people of all stripes do it, from working class people to white collar people, from rich people, poor people. It's just part of how you get around the city is to take public transit. Right? Same in New York, same in Chicago. It's just part of life. You don't drive. Why would you drive? Only a dummy would drive. So you take transit.
Yeah, so
I don't know. In Ottawa, we've been at public transit investments for so long, but it's still a very heavy car culture. Most people in Ottawa own more than one car and commute to work and commute back home again in the afternoon. I bet you it's the same way in Halifax, and it would be like pulling teeth to get people out of their cars and onto public transit because it's just not part of the culture. Just some thoughts. Thank you, Sam. Great to hear from you. Have a great weekend. Friday Free for All Talkback. We have cleared the lines. We'd love to hear from you. Having a tough time connecting with Ian right now, but hopefully he'll join us as well. Ian Lee from Carleton. But we can fit you in whatever's on your mind today. It's a Friday Free for All Talkback. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Yeah, it's a Friday Free for All Talkback. 1-833-668-2577. Lots of lines available there. We can fit you in the next 35 minutes quite easily. But it is a great pleasure to welcome back to our humble little radio show here from the Sprott School of Business at Carleton University, the globetrotting Professor Ian Lee. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Jet lagged, Rob, but I'm doing very well, thank you.
So where have you been?
I teach each year in Shanghai in an MBA that my university has with Donghua University, but I decided to go over a week earlier than my teaching assignment, and I went to Japan just to explore it and sightsee, and went to Tokyo, which is 40 million people, by the way. In other words, the population of Canada, and then I went to Kyoto, and it was really, really an amazing experience. Because Japan is third or fourth largest economy in the world, and it's a very, very advanced, a very high income economy. very heavily automated. Everything works there. The subways and the metro is just stunning. It's so efficient, and so I spent a week there, and then I went to China for 2 weeks to teach in Shanghai, and then on the way home I agreed to stop in Hawaii to give a paper on the current situation of Canada, our economic situation.
Well, I want to get into that with you right after the news. Here's what I want to ask you, though, Professor. So we've been hearing, the situation with the Strait of Hormuz and the energy crisis. It's been reported it's affecting Asia much more than, say, Canada, for example. Did you experience any of that? Did you see any of that? What can you tell us?
I did, in a sense. I mean, there was no shutdowns of the economy. There were no flight cancellations, at least up to that point. Although South Korea was, the Asian news. I was watching the, BBC and similar English broadcasts. South Korea was discussing very seriously rationing of fuel. The Asian economies, China and Japan and South Korea, have very little energy sources themselves, and that's why they desperately need our LNG and oil so much to become so they're less dependent on Middle East oil, for example. And they certainly are very conscious of it. I was certainly seeing it being discussed all the time there, and so it is having a very serious impact on the Asian economies, the shortage and the war in the Gulf.
Okay. Look, just hang on a few minutes. We're going to bring everybody up to date on the latest breaking news. I want your take on what's been hot in Canada while you've been away. And, this week, and I know you've been paying attention to it, trade, and irritants. The CBC reporting, the Americans want an entry fee. They want an entry fee in order us to advance talks on things like taking alcohol off the shelves and supply management and digital culture laws. I want your take on where everything kind of stands right now that you're back in the country. So hang on. Yeah, Professor Ian Lee is with us on a Friday. Good timing. He's just flew into Ottawa from, I think it was Vancouver today. So we'll talk to him coming up.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Yes, it is. And Professor Ian Lee has been kind enough to join us on a Friday. He has been out of the country. He's been in China. He's been in Japan. He's been in the United States, albeit Hawaii. You lucky devil. That sounds nice. How was Hawaii?
It was spectacular. It's a paradise, It's 75, 80 degrees, sunshine all the time. The beaches are spectacular, and it really is very, very lovely. I mean, you're in the middle of nowhere, really, halfway to Asia, actually. But it's just a lovely place. Expensive. It takes a while to get there. It's 5 hours from Vancouver to Hawaii. So from another 5 hours from Ottawa to there, so it's about 10, 11 hours to get from Ottawa to Hawaii. But it's still very lovely over there. Just a great place.
So while you were out of the country, I mean, there was a lot of noise this week, Professor, because of a couple of news reports that the Trump administration is seeking concessions from Canada in order to advance trade talks. CBC French, Radio Canada, in its news report, called it an entry fee. I didn't happen to see that. I would encourage everyone to read Brian Lilly in The Sun this week. He doesn't see it that way either. But it was compared to having to, pay a membership at Costco before you're allowed to shop there. But what the Americans want to see is movement on, your old target, supply management in dairy in particular. As well, the alcohol bans that are in place in 8 out of 10 Canadian provinces, and things like the Online News Act, Online Streaming Act, what we call the digital culture policies of the government. What do you think about this? How do you see it? Do you see that as an entry fee?
No, I'll be really blunt, and forgive me, but I think someone who says that has not studied trade relations and has not studied the trade file, because anyone who is informed and has studied this will know that the U.S. Trade Rep report to the Congress, USTR, that's the agency that monitors trade in the United States and they govern the United States, they have been publishing for a third of a century. I'll repeat that. A third of a century, going back to the 90s and the very first Clinton administration. Successive governments of the United States and successive trade reps have published a report showing the trade irritants between Canada and the United States. And supply management has been on that list for a third of a century. And as well as the telecom prohibition that mandates that American telecom companies may not enter Canada. And so the trade report, which I've been studying and using in my class since I started teaching in the late 80s, early 90s, documents these very serious irritants. So for someone to suggest that this is somehow that Donald Trump invented this, that someone who says that just simply is uninformed and is not aware that the trade rep, the U.S. government, has been publishing such a report for a third of a century, year after year after year. So these are trade irritants that have been there for a long time. And the argument is that it's been made by successive American governments from the Clinton administration going forward, including Barack Obama, is that the Canadian government demands full access, and we're given full access to the U.S. economy in the NAFTA or CUSMA agreement, but that we did not reciprocate. In other words, it's not a level playing field has been the argument of every president from Clinton until now. Donald Trump did not invent this or discover this. I'm not here to defend Donald Trump. I'm just here to put facts on the table. And that report is not a theory. It's not my opinion. It's a document, a legal document, tabled annually in the Congress of the United States. And anybody can download it listening to me. They can go and Google it and download that report.
Yeah,
So
it's actually a fairly easy read. It's actually a fairly easy read. I mean, it's a thick document, like 400 pages, because it deals with every country that the United States does trade with. There's just... How long would you say? 2 pages on Canada, maybe, in the whole report? You can read everything that's in there, right?
5 or 6 or 7 pages on Canada. And they have been consistently listing those trade irritants. And as I said, it goes back before Trump. The difference between Trump and past presidents was past presidents said, we don't like it, but we're not going to, go to war over it. We're not going to make a case out of it. In fact, Barack Obama, I remember when he addressed the Canadian Parliament several years ago now, going back, I guess, 10 years ago, he actually specifically mentioned these irritants. And he said, we're good friends with Canada. We don't like what you're doing, but we're going to put up with it because of our long-term relationship with Canada. Okay. So it is just simply inaccurate, factually false for someone to suggest that this has suddenly been invented by Donald Trump. It's been listed by every president for over 30 years.
Yeah, just in about 90 seconds here, and then I'll let you go, and you can get caught up on your nap time after your jet lag. But Mr. Carney, in his speeches, in his news conferences, he's taken to doing YouTube videos now called Forward Guidance. He still says it's a rupture, and in his YouTube video, he said our close relationship with the United States and our interdependence, if you will, with the United States, or integration with the United States, used to be a great strength. Now it's a weakness. What do you think of that, very quickly?
Very quickly, I just completely disagree. First off, that there was a rupture. A rupture to me is a radical break. I mean, Donald Trump didn't stand up and say, I'm repudiating capitalism and we're going to become a Marxist-Leninist country. That's a rupture, okay? He did not say, we no longer believe in trade with anybody or Canada. That's a rupture. Or he never just said, we're going to just stop trading whatsoever with Canada. That's a rupture. And by the way, for those who don't agree with me, Christine Lagarde, a very distinguished international public servant, currently the governor of the European Central Bank, and before that was the head of the IMF, and before that was the Minister of Finance in the French government, said right after at Davos, when Mark Carney announced the rupture, or put that forward, she said very sharply the next day, we disagree. She says there's been no rupture. She said there's a change in the rules and the demands, but that's not a rupture. The IMF head, the president of the IMF, the day after Lagarde disagreed with Carney, also disagreed with Prime Minister Carney, saying there is no rupture. And in terms of his most recent comments that it's a liability, I just cannot disagree more strongly. The United States, I gave my presentation in Hawaii on this subject. The United States is the largest economy on planet Earth and has been since the 1880s. And we must continue to trade with them. Yes, it's going to be bumpy. Yeah, we got to make some concessions. But the idea that we're going to stop dealing with the largest economy in the world, I just think is not a sustainable argument.
Well, look, it's great to get caught up with you after you've been away for so long. I know many of our listeners missed you, and we'll do this again Tuesday of next week at our usual time. Look forward to it.
Looking forward to it. Thanks very much, Rob.
Yeah, thanks. We'll see what the weekend brings. Professor Ian Lee, Sprott School of Business, Carleton University. Talkback, 1-833-668-2577. You can comment on that or anything else here on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Great to hear from Professor Ian Lee. Be good to hear from you today, too. 1-833-668-2577. About 10 minutes left here in Talkback. Lots of time to fit you in. Again, one of the questions that we had as a conversation starter today was about this continued boycott of U.S. wine and liquor sales. 8 out of 10 Canadian provinces. Until I looked that up this morning, I didn't appreciate that there were only 2 provinces not boycotting American-made liquor, Alberta and Saskatchewan. That's it. But as I mentioned to Professor Lee, this has been all over the news this week. The Trump administration seeking concessions from Canada, what was called an entry fee, in order to move forward with the trade negotiations. Now, the Prime Minister, Mark Carney, at his event in Ottawa yesterday, said, hey, that description, entry fee, that didn't come from me. I don't know where that came from, he said. But he was asked about the premiers and these booze bans and whether it was hurting trade talks. And he shot back. He really did. It was the most forceful, actually, that we've heard Prime Minister Carney on the current impasse, if you will. He says what's really hurting the trade talks are the tariffs. Tariffs on auto and auto parts, steel and aluminum, softwood lumber. Let's listen to this again from his news conference. This is Graham Richardson of CTV News asking the questions to the Prime Minister.
Last time I checked, Mr. Ford has a fair amount of control over the LCBO, even though I appreciate it's independent. But you told him to cool it on the ad that caused a lot of trouble. What if this alcohol thing...
And how did that work? Did he listen?
Yeah. But what if this alcohol thing...
I was right, by the way.
Well, what if this alcohol thing becomes more than an irritant? Look,
you know what's an irritant? Yeah. 50% tariff on steel, 50% tariff on aluminum, 25% tariff on automobiles, all the tariffs on forest products. Those are more than irritants. Those are violations of our trade deal. Okay? The client...
Yeah, that's good there, Curtis. Let's end that there. Okay, let's end there. We'll go to the next clip. I want you to hear what some of Trump's top people are saying about this. For example, you hear this fellow's name in the news all the time, Jameson Greer. He is the U.S. trade representative. He's the person our top people have to deal with. He is Ambassador Greer. And he was testifying in Washington this week. He was taking a bunch of softball questions from Republican members of Congress on the situation with Canada. And he brought up alcohol sales. And he brought up supply management in the dairy sector. You're going to hear here some questioning from Claudia Tenney, Republican member of the House of Representatives. She represents upstate, a district in upstate New York. Let's listen to some of that.
Canada has long discriminated against certain industries in my district, and that is what I want to focus on today. I got a couple quick things, but let's start with dairy, and we've talked about this before. As you recall, probably. My district is the 5th largest dairy producing district in the entire United States. For years, Canada has rigged their system to prevent U.S. dairy producers from fair access to Canada's markets. This year's National Trade Estimate Report, as every year's report details, Canada's market manipulation and unfair treatment of U.S. producers is still evident. The U.S. has fought for years to gain access to the Canadian dairy market, and yet Canada continues to violate USMCA and the spirit of its dairy commitments. Have you and your team raised these issues with our Canadian counterparts thus far, and have they been constructive in helping all of us resolve this issue with our friend to the north?
We have raised it repeatedly and frequently over the past year. Our Canadian counterparts have indicated as a general matter they're happy to talk to us about adjustments to USMCA and different things like that, but they have made no commitments on this front at this time.
Well, that's disappointing. So let's shift to wine, another issue detailed. Every Canadian province, with the exception of Alberta and Saskatchewan, has ceased distribution. Every Canadian province, with the exception of Alberta and Saskatchewan, has ceased distribution of U.S. wine and liquor products, including Ontario to the north. This is distorting the market, causing immense harm to our wine producers in the district. And have you and your team raised this issue as well with our Canadian counterparts, and have they been trying to help us? Have they been constructive in this issue, much like with the dairy issue?
Well, it's at the provincial level, right? So we hear from the federal government of Canada, well, it's the provinces, and then we do have 2 provinces who don't have this. That being said, I think we're kind of at the end of our rope in just asking for them to do this. Think about it this way. There are 2 countries that have retaliated economically against the United States in the past year, the People's Republic of China and Canada. So that's kind of the company that they're running in. So my sense is there may have to be an enforcement action to deal with this issue on wine and spirits in Canada.
Jamieson Greer, the U.S. Trade Representative, Ambassador Greer, enforcement action. There may have to be enforcement action. I don't know what that means. But the point being, it is clearly a sticking point. The alcohol issue and the dairy cartel. I'm Rob Snow. It's Talkback, 1-833-668-2577. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Booze and milk. That was in the news this week, basically. Booze and milk when it comes to trade talks with the Americans. Seems to be at an impasse over booze and milk. A White Russian or something. You have Jamieson Greer saying we want them to do something on alcohol. We want them to do something on the supply management in agriculture. So he was testifying at one committee in Washington, and then at another congressional committee, you had Howard Lutnick. As I said, if Trump is public enemy number 1 in Canada, Howard Lutnick is probably a close second. He's the U.S. Commerce Secretary. He's the guy that said recently when asked about Canada, they suck. Canada sucks, right? So he's been taken to task for that remark and similar remarks that he has made in the past by a senator. I mean, there's a deep partisan divide. It's a midterm election year. But this is a Democrat from New Hampshire, Jeanne Shaheen. Let's listen to this.
Secretary Lutnick, last week you said about Canada's economic strategy, and I quote, they suck. I believe your spokesperson then said this was about Canada's economy leeching off of the U.S. How does insulting our closest ally and neighbor help the businesses in my state of New Hampshire and states all across this country who are hurting because of the loss of Canadian business and tourism?
Canada's economy leans on the incredible $30 trillion economy of America. But
there's no doubt about that, Mr. Secretary. But insulting our closest ally and neighbor who provides a lot of business. We have a lot of businesses in New Hampshire, small businesses who work on both sides of the border. We have all those Canadian visitors who are not coming because of your comments and comments by the administration. How does that help our economy?
it is outrageous that Canada will not put U.S. spirits on the shelf. It is insulting
It is.
And disrespectful to America that they won't
Absolutely.
even put...
And my husband has an interest in a company that has American spirits. And they won't do it because of the insults from this president and comments like yours. So I want to go on to another question.
But can I have just one small comment, which is dairy is treated so badly, and your state cares about dairy, and we are trying desperately to get them to live to the deal that they have on USMCA and stop treating our dairy farmers so poorly, and your state cares about that, and we are fighting for that.
We do, but we are not going to get agreement when we keep insulting people.
So you hear it there. We don't like those dastardly Canadians, and they've taken the booze off the shelves. We don't like their dairy cartel. What a week it's been. That's where we stand right now, Canada-U.S. trade relations. Latest breaking news is coming up next. Talkback returns on Monday. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. This is News Radio.